Channel 4 and NBC bringing you full Gulf coverage.
From NBC News, America at War continues. Here are Garrick Utley and Mary Alice Williams.
The war in the Persian Gulf has taken a dangerous new turn as Iraq launched a missile assault on Israel during the night. Several Scud missiles slammed into a populated neighborhood of Tel Aviv. Initially, it was feared the missiles carried nerve gas, prompting authorities to order Israelis to take refuge in safe areas. NBC's Martin Fletcher was preparing to go on the air from Tel Aviv when the order came to put on his gas mask. He did, and broadcast live reports with the mask on, until authorities announced that it was safe to remove it. After the attack was over, residents of Tel Aviv picked through the rubble. Though the damage was widespread, latest reports indicate that 10 people suffered only minor injuries. This morning, Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir called his cabinet into urgent session to decide whether to retaliate for the attack. Earlier, President Bush condemned the attack, and the White House announced that a new wave of airstrikes had been ordered against Iraqi targets. Larry Weidman is standing by in Tel Aviv. And Larry, in just about an hour, that cabinet meeting will take place.
Yes, that's right, Mary Alice. They'll meet in Jerusalem, and it may well be that we won't hear what happens at the cabinet meeting. They very often will make a decision or extend the debate without any public announcement. They have another regular meeting scheduled on Sunday, and they may decide to wait until seeing what the American response is in the next couple of days in Iraq before they actually take any action, if they indeed decide to do so in the end.
They'll be deciding whether to respond, but also, is it accurate to say they'll be deciding how to respond? What are their military options?
Well, as anybody who follows the Middle East knows, Israel has probably the most formidable permanent military presence in the Middle East. And they have options all the way from launching a couple of their own missiles toward Baghdad to scrambling hundreds of very sophisticated fighters and bombers and taking out virtually any target in Iraq if they chose to. And as they demonstrated in 1981, they're not afraid to use those air weapons. But at this point, it's very difficult to say that they will take any action. It seems more likely they will abide by agreements they've made both with Undersecretary of State Eagleberger and probably in private conversations with the White House to maintain the low profile and give the Americans a chance to deal with Iraq, at least for the moment.
Larry, heightening the tensions for Israel, one would presume, is the 20,000 Jordanian troops now massed along the 400-mile border with Israel. That is more troops than they've ever had there since the 1967 war, which Jordan lost and incidentally lost the West Bank. Does that influence the Israeli government at this point?
Well, of course, they watch it very, very carefully, and the military intelligence of Israel maintains over the Arab world, especially Syria, which is really the most dangerous of its frontline neighbors. Nothing happens there that isn't watched closely, and the Israelis are watching developments in Jordan very closely. But so far, the reading is that those movements in Jordan are essentially defensive. They are being taken in the open and not taken by the Israelis as an overt threat toward any kind of action across the Jordan River.
In other words, Jordan would not attack unless attacked.
That's probably true, and Jordan being the gateway between, or the bridge between Israel and Iraq, obviously feels quite nervous having those two superpowers on either side.
Larry, how has all this affected the occupied territories?
The Israelis recognize that the potential for trouble in the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip, the opportunity for trouble there was significant. And they enforced curfews at the beginning of the attack on Iraq. Everything is closed down. There is nothing going on the West Bank right now except a lot of Israeli presence. There is nobody on the street, no one on the streets at all except the Israeli army, and that's the way they're going to keep it until the whole situation cools down.
Are rules of war in force there in the occupied territories? In other words, if there are stones thrown, they might be met with deadly force?
In a situation where Israel considers itself at war, the police minister and other government officials have said that incidents which might in other circumstances be civil insurrection could very well be considered acts of war and would be dealt with accordingly. So far, though, the strong military presence has just completely wiped out any possibility of the Arabs or the Palestinians responding against the army, and they haven't had to really invoke any extraordinary powers so far.
So the key question is whether the Israeli government considers itself at war.
That's true. It's a delicate question, and one in which the definition will be very carefully drawn when they finally make a decision in this cabinet meeting. That may be one of the issues that they come out with a decision on.
Okay, thank you very much, Larry Weidman in Tel Aviv. And now we're going back to Garrick.
Mary Alice, as we talk about the ongoing war there, we're aware of a coalition of forces involved in the air attacks, principally American, Saudi, a few Kuwaiti planes and British planes. And now we're getting a dispatch from Rome that the Italians have been involved in that too. And some sad news there, an Italian plane appears to have been lost. The dispatch from Agence France Presse in Rome says an Italian Tornado jet failed to return to its base in Dhafra from an overnight mission over the Arabian Peninsula. The Italian Air Force Command announced here. It says 10 Italian Tornado planes, the fighter bombers, were engaged in fighting in the Gulf. So the Italians have been at it. The French also, of course, have been involved in the air attacks too. So as those airstrikes continue, and we are from time to time getting information from the ministries of defense of these other nations that are involved. It's not all coming out from the Pentagon or from the American command, the headquarters in Saudi Arabia. As we continue to follow those events, we want to check in Cairo and see what is going on there. Egypt, of course, is one of the principal Arab countries in the coalition against Iraq. It was there last August, shortly after the invasion and occupation of Kuwait, that an Arab summit conference was held where the Arab League narrowly voted in favor of to take action against Saddam Hussein. It is from that summit conference that the coalition of forces eventually emerged. The UN resolutions were voted. So Egypt plays a very important role. Excuse me, and our correspondent Robin Lloyd is there in Cairo. Robin, what can you tell us about the situation in Cairo this morning?
Hi, Garrick. We've had no reaction from the government here yet, but I think one can expect that the Egyptian government will condemn the Iraqi attack on Israel eventually and urge restraint on the part of Israel, no counterattack. President Hosni Mubarak has said publicly that Israel has a right to defend itself just like any other country. It's not clear exactly what he means by that, but probably in principle the Egyptian government is prepared to accept some kind of counterattack by the Israelis, even though they won't like it. They feel that if Israel does go forward with some kind of retaliation in the next few hours or within the next day or two, it plays right into Saddam's hands. And as one official told me, he said, things are going so well in this operation now, why would the Israelis want to do that? It would just jeopardize the whole operation.
That's very understandable from the Cairo point of view as well as from the Washington point of view. Tell me, though, Israel, or Egypt, of course, although it has a major contingent of forces in Saudi Arabia, still is going to have to answer that question whether it'll commit those forces if it comes or if and when it comes to a land war. What are you hearing there, not just from official sources, but from Egyptians you meet, the man in the street, in terms of how prepared the Egyptians are to really commit their men and their blood to this operation if it does come to that?
Well, it's a complex question. I think if you start out with the fact that Mubarak has sent to the front 35,000 of his best soldiers, his best combat soldiers, most of whom have been trained in American techniques so that they can work well with American soldiers and American equipment. So clearly the force that he has sent there, he has sent with the intention possibly of putting them into the fighting to liberate Kuwait, and not just as a symbol of Arab forces there. However, what would be the commitment if this war gets complicated? Would Egypt send more troops? That's difficult to say, and it's not clear what the staying power of the Egyptian public is in this whole issue. Certainly they're very incensed at what Saddam Hussein has done, And polls that have been done here show that about 85% of the public is for Mubarak and what Mubarak has done by sending troops there.
Of course, as you indicate, the real question is how deep is that support? The Egyptians, in many ways, have always, although they are Arabs, they've considered themselves to be a nation apart. We knew that was the case when President Sadat was in power there. The rest of the Arab world sort of isolated and ostracized Egypt because of its relationships and its diplomatic ties with Israel. Egypt felt it was big enough to go its own way, so Egypt really plays a very central role, and even today now under Mubarak, more and more a leadership role in the Arab portion of this coalition, which raises the question, again, of the depth of this support. Do you get any indication, Robin Lloyd, that officials in Egypt, although the polls show this support today, are really concerned as to how it would hold up in the long run if it comes to conflict?
Well, I think Egypt, like all the allies, are hoping that this will be a short war, that it doesn't go into months, that it's just a matter of weeks. If it is a matter of weeks, Egypt stands to gain quite a bit. I think Mubarak likes to think in his own mind that his forces carrying the Egyptian flag may be the first ones to arrive in Kuwait City. I think he's seen the prominence that this is going to give him in the Arab world, and for that reason he may want to try to get the commitment from American forces to get Egyptian forces right in there in the fighting. Mubarak apparently, and this has not been confirmed by any official source, but I hear unofficially that Mubarak has agreed to allow his forces to fall under the command of the Americans. And in that case, he does seem to be suggesting that his forces could be used in the fighting.
That would be a very significant decision if it turns out to be that, putting his forces under American command. Robin Lloyd in Cairo, thank you very much. You'll be following events there in the hours, indeed the days to come. Now let's turn to Europe. Many European countries have sent their contingents to the Gulf Force. Ed Rabel is standing by in our listening post in our London bureau. Ed, it is midday over there now in Europe. What kind of a reaction are you getting from governments as well as from the press and average public opinion in terms of the events in the Gulf?
Hi, Garrick. Well, the British Prime Minister, John Major, reacted swiftly to the Iraqi missile attack on Israel. A spokesman for him said the Prime Minister was, quote, appalled by these unprovoked and unforgivable attacks. He was in consultation with both the U.S. and Israel after the attacks, but so far there's been no comment by the Prime Minister on what recommendations, if any, he was making about how Israel should respond. In Germany, Chancellor Helmut Kohl said he learned of the attack with, quote, deep dismay. Pope Paul II said the war itself marked a grave defeat for the world. And in other developments here, Garrick, in Glasgow, Scotland, police and immigration officials arrested 6 Iraqi nationals on Thursday and held them. And on Wednesday, the police arrested 28 Iraqi nationals on grounds of their alleged threat to national security. And they notified a total of 67 Iraqis that they could be deported soon. Of course, in addition to being anxious over the war and the attacks against Israel, people here are very concerned about the possibility of terrorism. In the subways, there are notices urging people to be alert to the possibility of bombs. And there have been anti-war demonstrations here, Garrick, but the British people continue to support the UN action against Iraq. Garrick?
To continue on that point, the Europeans would be, it is considered, on the front line of a terrorist war, probably much more than Americans are. Everything we hear is that terrorist networks are better built and based and organized in Europe than they are here in the United States, which is much further away from the Middle East. And yet, as you point out, in Britain at least, the commitment from the very beginning to military action has really been stronger, according to public opinion surveys there, than it has been in the United States. How does one explain that? Because the British probably see the Americans as the dominant force there. It doesn't have to be the British war.
Well, that's right. The British have indeed been the staunchest of the allies in this UN commitment. I think it has to do with the closeness of London to the action, the various communities that are here. There are 6,500 Kuwaitis in exile here. There is a 5,000 person population of Iraqis. And the British have been attacked themselves on their own territory in the past during the Second World War, and they have had the terrorism experience of Ireland, so Northern Ireland, and on their own soil. So I think it's an understanding of how grave a situation like this can be, and how one ought to have a very stiff upper lip and a tough stance in a situation like this.
We look around the European continents, not just the British are there. We just noted a moment ago how an Italian fighter bomber now is reported missing on a mission. The French have sent their planes up. Several of them have been hit, although not lost. The Germans sent some of their fighters, interceptors, to NATO bases in Turkey, not to be used in an offensive attack against Iraq, but to defend Turkey in case the Iraqi Air Force were to attack that country. So what we have here are the principal countries sending their air forces. The Spanish have some ships there in the Persian Gulf. We just about see every European country contributing actively to this operation. Is this giving Europeans a sense that they may not be the world power, some of them might think they should play, and yet at the same time they are there at the table, and this is something that's very important for Europe now as we enter the 1990s?
Well, I think so, and it's, as some people around here are saying, virtually unprecedented, the kind of support that is being given. There is a sense that you get here that the French at the outset were rather lukewarm in their position on it. They kept insisting that there ought to be a Middle East peace conference and that somehow Saddam Hussein ought to be allowed to save face, and that there should be a continuation of negotiations. But now that this action has been taken, the French have come on board apparently rather solidly in the process. So an almost unprecedented response from the European powers here to this, although Germany, as has been pointed out, because of its constitution, has not actually committed forces.
Ed Rabel, I imagine many people these early morning or mid-morning hours through the night in the United States are listening to our conversation saying, this is all well and good what the Europeans are doing, but let's talk about money. In the United States, it's estimated we're now spending about $1 billion a day on this war. What are the Europeans really contributing? And how do they react when an American poses that question to them, the money question?
Well, quite frankly, I don't have a good answer to that question. The Europeans... Yes, go ahead.
Maybe they don't have a good answer to the question, but I know it's a question that many Americans are asking. Representatives and senators in Congress are asking it. They're asking why the Japanese, the Europeans, aren't going to be paying more of a financial burden as this war goes on. Don't Europeans see this as being a problem, if only a public relations or a political problem?
Well, certainly the Europeans, just as the Americans, I mean to say the British, of course, question why the Germans, for example, have not contributed more, and don't quite understand what the Japanese are up to in this process. So they, like the Americans, would like to see a greater commitment, and they are quite frankly puzzled by it.
Ed Rabel in London, thank you very much. We'll continue to check in with you from time to time to see what is happening on this Friday overseas. In terms of other overseas developments, the markets have opened up. We know what happened yesterday. The markets, stock markets from Tokyo to New York around the world soared. Well, Tokyo is the bellwether. It's the first market, a major market to open up, and the Nikkei average there ended up about 361 points. That's a rise of 1.5%. It's been up. It went down with the news of the Iraqi attacks, missile attacks against Israel. It went back up, and it is, at the end of the day, up 1.5%. Mary Alice, let's go back to you.
Okay, Garrick, we can presume that the Allied warfare is continuing over Baghdad, over military installations in Iraq and Kuwait, the punishing pounding they're taking from the air. But there has been very little official information about those bombing runs from the Allied side. Iraq is not silent, however. An Iraqi military spokesman monitored on Baghdad radio claimed the country's air defense forces shot down 5 more enemy aircraft on Friday, bringing to 65 the number of Allied planes Baghdad says it has downed. Now, the Allied side says there are 6. As you know, the Italian Tornado bomber that was just announced lost in battle 1 Kuwaiti jet, 2 British jets, and 2 American jets. The first identified American casualty is Lieutenant Commander Michael Speicher, a 33-year-old fighter pilot based in Mayport, Florida. He leaves behind a wife and 2 babies, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. He was deployed on the aircraft carrier Saratoga the one that the Navy calls the Mean Sarah. Arthur Kent is in Saudi Arabia, and Art, that carrier has had its share of mourning already in this operation, has it not?
Yes, Mary Alice, you know, with this major operation going underway with all these sophisticated weapons underway, very large political and military questions, it's often easy to forget the individuals, the human beings that are caught up in this tragedy. And that's why today, in the minds of every U.S. and Allied serviceman and woman over here, there is a place for Lieutenant Commander Michael Speicher, who is the first confirmed American combat casualty. He is missing in action after his Navy FA-18 Hornet aircraft was shot down by Iraqi anti-aircraft fire while he was flying in the first wave, in the first attacks last night, the night before last, over Iraq. Now, he's a 33-year-old Navy pilot from Jacksonville, Florida. What else do we know about him? He was a university graduate in economics, in management, and accounting. And as a Navy pilot, one of the most committed and highly trained of U.S. service people over here. And NBC News actually was able to visit Lieutenant Commander Speicher's home ship, the USS Saratoga, last Thanksgiving. It's more a floating island of 5,500 people than it is a ship, and the FA-18 Hornets are one of the combat aircraft deployed off the deck of the Sarah, as she's affectionately known. There's a great spirit of camaraderie among the pilots and among all the ratings on board these warships. The Sarah will certainly be missing Lieutenant Commander Michael Speicher today, as it did yesterday when he failed to return from his bombing run over Iraq. No accident, Navy pilots would tell you that the two U.S. aircraft that are missing and have been missing now for some time are both Navy planes. Naval pilots pride themselves on the special skill it takes to bring their aircraft back onto a moving deck, quite frequently at night after a long combat run that sometimes involves mid-air refueling. Lieutenant Commander Michael Speicher, again 33-year-old naval pilot, one of the most highly trained individuals in the U.S. forces here, probably most likely, as we saw when we visited the Saratoga over Thanksgiving, a very committed flyer and professional who was eager to test his skill, eager to follow orders, eager to go into combat if that was the decision of his commander-in-chief, and probably took part in his raid to the utmost of his ability, unable, of course, to know that he would not return from that raid. Mary Alice?
And Arthur, we know that the other American fighter pilot who is lost is not identified yet because search and rescue missions are underway. Let me talk to you about the possibility of a ground war. We've had reports through this night that the British Tough Tank Regiment, the Desert Rats, are moving north toward the Kuwaiti border. We've heard that the coastal highway is jammed with military convoys. Have you seen any indication that ground troops are moving into place?
Well, we're still waiting. It's been about almost 18 hours since we've had the last information and pictures back from the Pentagon-supervised pools of journalists, the small groups of journalists who are in forward positions on the ground, moving with the Army and with the Marine units closer towards Kuwait. We know from their earlier reports that this was the pattern, that all units were moving, edging into position. That's been taking place over a period of weeks. No small thing to get all of the units that were deployed, after all, more or less a defensive position in the month of September, gradually adapting to a more offensive lineup, aiming towards Kuwait, but massively reinforced over the month of November and December and January. And now that war has begun, and that the targets and the objectives are being softened up by massive air bombardment, these ground forces will be repositioning, moving much closer. And so even though we are hearing these reports, such as we did with the Desert Rats, the British 7th Armored, we do not yet have any firm signal that there is going to be a ground offensive in the coming days.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll check in with you later. Art Candid, Saudi Arabia. We'll be back.
From Channel 4, this is a Gulf War News Extra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Puckett. The big question out of the Gulf this morning, will Israel strike Iraq for firing missiles on it that injured some 10 people? Israel has hinted it will, but hasn't acted yet. If it does, it'll threaten the alliance of 28 nations, many of them Arabic, that together are taking on Saddam Hussein. Meantime, the bombing of Iraq continues and more counterattacks by Iraq are possible. We'll continue our local coverage of events in the Persian Gulf War in just a moment.
The holidays may be gone, but there's one package being held over just for you. The Money Store Prime Package with fixed-rate home equity loans as low as prime. We're extending our holiday offer for a limited time only to help homeowners pay off credit card bills, make home improvements, anything at all. Trust the Money Store to give homeowners a prime package when they need it most. Call right now, 1-800-LOAN-YES. Program may be canceled without notice.
Apollo people. Men from all walks of life who have found that baldness and receding hairlines don't need to mar their appearance. They have found how easy it is to let the professional staff at Apollo Hair Replacement Center consult and then take care of their hair. The results can be satisfying as well as rewarding. No matter how severe your hair loss problem, Apollo has the answer. Call today.
Many feared a start of war would be hard on the economy. Don Aaron reports the first reaction is just the opposite.
Oh, this market's going to run.
Stockbroker Michael Goldston came to work this morning expecting Wall Street to show its approval of the war effort in the Middle East. From the moment the New York Stock Exchange opened at 9:30 Eastern Time, it was clear Goldston's expectations were right on target.
We're now up 71 points, 40 million shares. This is 1/3 of the volume that we did all day yesterday, and we've done it in 20 minutes. And there's not a stock on my machine that's down.
Transportation stocks, including airlines, posted large gains, and that could be great news for flyers and the economy as a whole. It appears to indicate the price of jet fuel may be coming down.
Lower oil prices will be passed on, and lower ticket fares. Also, the less money that the airlines have to spend on oil, the more money they're going to have to expand, which creates new jobs for the economy and more airplanes to be built, and hopefully trickles all the way down.
Brad Meyer hopes his company is part of that trickle. Meyer is one of the owners of Sail Air Travel Agency and says lower jet fuel prices may be the shot in the arm the airline industry needs.
We feel as if automatically, if the airlines don't have to pay high fuel costs, they will be able to offer their product at a much lower price, drawing back people who are marginal travelers in terms of the airlines and can only afford an inexpensive airline ticket.
You wouldn't know it by visiting gas pumps, but crude oil futures prices posted their biggest one-day fall in history on the New York Mercantile Exchange. Will we see a big drop in gas prices? Hard to predict, says W.J. Wallace of Wallace Exxon.
Well, since the president has opened up a reserve, we look for it to stay a little bit stable right now. It depends on how it goes over in the Middle East. If it goes good over there, it could come down. If it goes bad, it could go up.
And motorists aren't looking for huge savings on gasoline anytime soon.
I think the oil company's going to get rich now again. But the consumer is not going to have anything out of this.
Though the Allied air raids haven't brought a drop in gas prices, the economic news thus far has been encouraging. Analysts predict it'll remain positive as long as military efforts in the Middle East go well. Don Aaron, Channel 4 News.
Taking a quick look now at Nashville's weather. Currently it is 31 degrees and clear skies. Winds from the south at 6, the barometer 30.27 and rising, humidity 100%. Stay tuned to Channel 4 for continuing coverage of the latest developments of the Gulf War. NBC will bring you 24-hour coverage of the latest happenings in the Middle East, and Channel 4 will bring you local updates every half hour. Our next update at 2:55.
From NBC News, America at War continues. Here are Garrick Utley and Mary Alice Williams.
Here is the latest as we continue to monitor events in the war following Iraqi missile attacks. Israel is considering its next move. Israel's military chief says his country is obliged to respond to that attack. Israeli officials say at least 10 people have been injured in the Scud missile attack. At least 8 missiles were fired and 5 struck Israeli territory, but none of the missiles carry the feared chemical warheads. Israel's outrage is being matched at the White House, with President Bush condemning Saddam Hussein's further aggression. A fresh wave of air attacks has been ordered against Iraq. White House spokesman Marlon Fitzwater says coalition forces are attacking missile sites and other targets in Iraq. We're seeing scenes here from Israel following that incident today. In Saudi Arabia, officials say a U.S. Patriot missile was fired by a ground crew at the big base in Dhahran. We're seeing the nighttime pictures there. It intercepted an Iraqi missile aimed at the Allied base. This crucial piece of U.S. military hardware passed its first test, you might say, with flying colors. Also in Dhahran, journalists were seen putting on their gas masks in case of an attack by Iraqi missiles. Luckily, no missiles have landed there, and there has been no sign of a chemical attack, but they have the gas masks at the ready just in case. There is only one known U.S. casualty of the war so far. The Pentagon has now announced Lieutenant Commander Michael Spiker, 33, is missing in action because his body has not been recovered. He is from Jacksonville, Florida. He was shot down by an Iraqi surface-to-air missile over Iraqi territory. News reports indicate that early today, a second U.S. plane had been shot down, but there are no details on the fate of that crew man. Also, as we noted a little while ago, the Italian government claims that one of its planes is missing after an operation over Iraqi-held territory. The story that we're really watching very closely is that in Israel of the Israeli cabinet meeting today to decide what kind of action to take following the missiles fired by Iraq at Israel overnight there. Larry Weidman of NBC News is standing by. Larry, what's the latest you can report?
Well, good morning, Gary. It's now about 10:30 in the morning in Israel. The cabinet is meeting in Jerusalem, and the Deputy Foreign Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is expected to have a news conference around noon in about an hour and a half. So we would assume the cabinet meeting will be over by then, and whether or not it will have made a decision, and whether or not that decision might include some sort of retaliation, maybe we'll have a hint then. So far, nothing.
Of course, the big decision and the decisive step the Israelis have to take is to whether to go ahead with the position they have proclaimed all along, that if they are attacked, they would retaliate. And of course, they're being asked, as you indicated, by the Americans not to do that, to show a certain forbearance, so as not to put an additional strain on the multinational alliance there. It's maybe difficult to gauge public opinion, but you've been there covering affairs for some time now. What do you think is the public opinion pressure that might be on the government? Would it be difficult for the government to say, okay, we're not going to do anything right now? And could they get the population, the Israelis, to go along with them and understand this?
If this missile attack had happened 2 days ago, the public outrage would be significant. There is public outrage already, but the pressure to do something would have been almost insurmountable. However, because of the dramatic attack by principally the American forces on Iraq yesterday, the Israelis now, I think, had the opportunity, the rare opportunity, to sit back and watch somebody else attack an Arab country. And the fact that the Americans accounted themselves quite well in the air over Iraq leads, I think, many Israelis to believe that maybe this time they can sit out this war for a day or two and see whether they may be able to sit it out almost completely.
Good point there, Larry Weidman, and stand by and we'll see whether the Israeli cabinet comes to the same decision, that same conclusion, as we continue to monitor events there. Mary Alice?
Another country watching events in Israel very carefully indeed is Jordan, not a disinterested party. Dennis Murphy is standing by in Amman, Jordan. What do you expect in terms of Jordan's response?
Well, Mary Alice, the attack on Israel is very worrying here. After all, Jordan shares a 400-mile ceasefire line with Israel. The Jordanian army is at its highest state of alert. There are 125,000 soldiers on their post right now. Jordan has gone the extra mile not to be dragged into an Israeli-Iraqi confrontation. An official said here earlier today, "We're alerted for any Israeli surprise response to the Iraqi attack." The official went on to say that Jordan expects a, quote, severe Israeli response. Now, we're talking here about Jordanian expectations. We just heard Larry Weidman say that perhaps the Israelis would sit one out. That is something that would please the Jordanians a great deal. The great fear here is that Jordan is going to become the battleground between an Israeli-Iraq confrontation. The U.S. Embassy here, Mary Alice, is again today saying that it's advising U.S. citizens to remain indoors. This is Friday. It's the holy day. And in the past, Friday prayers have been the occasion for some violent anti-Western demonstrations among the Muslim fundamentalists. Friday prayers now are still about, 2 or 3 hours away. And we're also keeping an eye today on the Jordanian border to the east with Iraq. That's where the refugees from war would try and flee to a safe point. The UN committee that deals on refugee matters is meeting at this hour in Amman to try to come up with a strategy for what could just be a huge wave of people coming east out of Iraq. Mary Alice?
Dennis, Jordan already has a huge refugee problem, does it not? 153,000 refugees went there on August 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, right after the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. And does that continue today?
Well, it does. There are more. We had 100 refugees 2 nights ago, and now I understand they're becoming considerable numbers. If you remember last summer, Mary Alice, we were talking about this no man's land. If you go east of where we are in Amman, Jordan, out across the desert, about 3 hours drive, you come to a trucking checkpoint, and then there's another perhaps 30 miles before you get to the Iraqi border proper. That was the area we were calling the no man's land. The numbers were just enormous last year during at the start of the confrontation. I read some numbers the other day. Jordan believes that it processed 850,000 refugees from Kuwait and Iraq in that time. The bill for taking care of those people amounted to more than $55 million, of which Jordan received only $12 million in international donations. So it's been stuck for a huge bill in taking care of these people. It has said that it will allow people to enter the country whose the residents, if the refugees are from countries that acted in a responsible way in getting those people out of Jordan. But the people who are coming through, they probably won't have documentation. They will have left with the shirts on their back. There's no way. There's going to be a huge pileup out there in the desert again. The Red Cross has a camp. The one that's set up now can handle up to 30,000 people. But Mary Alice, they've been talking about worst scenario plans of maybe 2 million people heading out of that desert, and this is the way out. You come out through Jordan. Jordan can say we're going to close the border to them, but compassion and humanity dictates that there's going to be a huge pressure point and that Jordan will have to give and allow those people in. It's going to need, we're going to hear the plea again soon, probably tomorrow and the days after, for international help. They're going to need money, they're going to need airplanes.
And they are getting money. At least we should say that the United Nations is considering increasing the amount of money it's giving to Jordan to handle the refugee problem. Also, the Japanese government is arguing, we could even say squabbling now, over whether to send airplanes to take the refugees out. But out to where, of course, is the question you've already brought up. What if Israel responds with a very aggressive attack against Iraq? What does Jordan do militarily?
Jordan tries to do nothing on the ground. They don't want tanks coming in from either side. Jordan has been perceived as tilting towards Iraq in this affair, as you know, Mary Alice, though it's been trying to be very careful and neutral and tread the ground in honoring the UN sanctions. But President King Hussein, of Jordan, is a close friend of Saddam Hussein. Mm-hmm. Virtually all of this country's trade is with Iraq. It's the source of its oil. It needs to have good relations with Iraq. So it does not want armies coming in. And King Hussein's government made a point the other day that it will not only be enforcing the border with Israel, but would be watching the border to the east with Iraq very closely. Airspace was closed over the country for a few days. It opened yesterday. A commercial flight went out to Larnaca, and frankly, I don't know the status of the airspace this morning. I suspect there are no flights coming in and out of this country, but they're going to be looking at the airspace too. But look at the map. We have Iraq on one side, Israel on the other, and Jordan's in the middle. It can say that it wants to keep the tanks out. It can say that it wants to protect the airspace, but geography is a very cruel partner for this country.
In other words, if they roll over Jordan or fly over Jordan, Jordan can't do anything about it.
Well, I can tell you what they have told both Iraq and Israel. They will do their very best to make sure that anyone who comes in by ground, anyone who comes in by air will be repelled. And they're saying that to Iraq. Iraq is a friend.
All right, thank you very much, Dennis Murphy and Amman. A crucial time in what are the very early stages of this Gulf War, and the State Department is, of course, watching every decision over there very carefully. Lisa Myers is standing by. Lisa?
Hi, Mary Alice. I was interested by a report, which I think you just mentioned, that Japan plans to offer about $2 billion more in aid to pay the cost of forces in the Persian Gulf. This brings Japan's total contribution for the entire Desert Shield operation to about $6 billion. It's about $4 billion to help the United States defray the cost of the military activity, and $2 billion to frontline states such as Jordan to help them pay or offset the losses to their economy. This is not likely to silence Japan's critics. Many members of Congress and privately some members of the administration believe that both Japan and Germany have been almost miserly when it comes to doing their fair share in contributing to this effort. You have to remember that both Germany and Japan are very reliant on foreign oil. They also have very large economies. They argue that their own constitutions prohibit them from making military contributions to the effort. Germany has contributed only a total of $4 billion, half of it which will come to the United States to help defray the cost of military forces. In fact, so that brings the total contributions from Germany and Japan for this entire Desert Shield operation to only $10 billion, which is frankly not much. And one of the things you're going to see once this crisis is over is Secretary of State James Baker going back around the world trying to collect money to help the United States defray the cost of this effort.
Which may not have been in his job description. You know, we talk about $10 billion, or as you said, $4 billion from Japan for the United States, $2 billion from Germany for the United States. That $6 billion, that doesn't even pay for 1 week.
No, in fact, were it not for the Saudis and the Kuwaitis, we would be even in worse shape than we're looking at. Most experts believe that when this war is over, the United States will be left with about half of the bill. The Saudis have said that they will pay 40 to 50% of the cost of any war. The Kuwaitis also have indicated that they will be generous. But this war is costing at least $1 billion a day by most estimates. So the price tag is likely to be very large. And I might add that all the contributions that we have received so far don't even pay the cost of Desert Shield before it became Desert Storm. Mary Alice?
Lisa, Secretary of State Baker may have to become a tax collector after Desert Storm is over, one way or the other. But right now, he is still working in a diplomatic rank and keeping his eye on the Israeli Knesset meeting to decide what their response will be to the Iraqi attack of last night. What are their options? What are their concerns?
Well, the concern, obviously, is that Israel will retaliate. I think that the thing that the crisis task force on the 7th floor of this building is most worried about tonight were the remarks of Israel's chief of staff indicating that his country is almost required to respond to this sort of attack. I think that there will be some they probably feel a little better that there was no immediate response and believe that since the there were not any deaths associated with the attack, there may be a chance that Israel will hold its fire. But obviously, if Israel retaliates, it's going to be a very complicated situation tomorrow. One of the things to keep in mind, though, is based on the assurances they have from various Arab states, assuming that Israel's response is really in proportion to what the Iraqi attack was, that the only coalition partner that they're really in danger of losing would be Syria. And the loss of Syria militarily really wouldn't matter, because Syria's military contribution is more important for symbolic reasons than for actual military reasons. The reason losing Syria would hurt is that it's an Arab nation, and for all the other Arab nations in the coalition, there's something to be said for the comfort of numbers. So right now, they are, I think it would be safe to say that they are very concerned about this situation, but that at this point, it is not as bad as it might be.
Okay.
Mary Alice.
Thank you, Lisa Myers at the State Department. Now back to Garrick Utley.
Mary Alice and Lisa, you're talking about money and contributions from other nations. The good news that Japan is going to come up with $2 billion more. The bad news is, according to the estimates, that'll finance about 4 days of the cost of ammunition used in the war against Iraq. Some people at the Brookings Institution have done an analysis of what the cost. This is just ammunition, and they estimate the cost is running at $500 million a day. How can they spend so much? Burn it off, so to speak? Well, look at this. We fired more than 100 Tomahawk cruise missiles. They go for $1.3 million each time we see one of those missiles going off from the Wisconsin or the Missouri. That's $1.3 million going off to seek a target. The FA-18 fighter that was shot down has a price tag of $31 million. Then you go to the Phoenix air-to-air missiles on the U.S. planes, cost about $800,000, and so it goes, $500 million a day. It adds up that cost. Of course, the real cost we are concerned about is not money, it's the human cost. So far, very few lives among the Allied services have been lost. Only one has been confirmed and identified. Another is still missing there. But many of the people in this country demonstrating and concerned about the war are concerned about that. And the start of hostilities in the Persian Gulf also started a new round of anti-war protests around the world as well as here. And here in the United States, the protests are continuing. Our correspondent David Burrington has this report.
The anti-war demonstrators show no sign of running out of gas. Major protests continue in San Francisco, where several thousand people converged on the stock exchange. And in Seattle, more trouble at the city's federal building. But there's also more vocal reaction now on the other side in support of the war. 1,000 high school kids rallied in Seattle.
We believe in our country, and when people believe in our country, our pride shines right through everything, and that's what I have
to say. In San Francisco, the anti-war cause has been hurt by violent incidents. A police car burned, smashed windows along the demonstration routes.
I'm against the war, but I don't feel like with any kind of violence is the answer.
Overall, the demonstrations don't appear to be changing many people's opinions, just reinforcing what they already believe.
I think that this is a point of view that needs to be expressed. I don't agree with everything that's being done, but I have more agreement with this than I do with the president's policy.
I'd rather see people supporting the troops or risking their lives in the Middle East.
Some people feel the demonstrations get too much television coverage.
We talk about these demonstrations and they show these demonstrations, but they don't show on TV the number of people who are pro-war, whatever it is that's going on there. Get their side of the view, but they don't do that.
According to the latest Lou Harris poll, the demonstrators tend to be women, young men who worry a new draft might get them involved, and older people. Most men are solidly behind the president. Lou Harris himself, who wrote a book on opinion during Vietnam, says more than 70% of the country is rallying behind the president. But that could change.
But you have to understand that close to half the people say they will only support the war if
it's short and the casualties are small. And if casualties begin to mount, I think you're going to get a melding of support here.
So can we expect to see the crowds here swell if the war drags on and there are casualties?
I'd say if the big test of our invasion of Kuwait takes place and there is an Iraqi resistance there, then I think you'll begin to get resistance and demonstrations increasing, no doubt about it.
At the moment, according to Harris, 16% of the American people are so against the war, they're willing to join in a protest. David Burrington, NBC News, San Francisco.
And as we wait to see to what extent the war does spread or escalate, a key factor is Israel retaliating against the Iraqi missile attacks. And of course, between Israel and Iraq is Jordan. We want to go to Amman, Jordan, the Jordanian capital there, and talk again with Professor Kamal Abu Jaber of Jordan University. Good morning, or I should say good afternoon, sir. Thank you for being with us again. Good
morning to you.
Professor, I'm sure you're waiting to see what comes out of the Israeli cabinet, what decision is taken. Are you concerned that the Israelis may call for retaliation, which might mean Israeli planes overflying Jordanian territory and perhaps spreading the war in that regards?
Definitely so. Not only concerned, but I know for sure that the Israelis would retaliate. As you know, the Israelis have always retaliated in such cases, and in fact even taken the initiative on occasion. So there is no reason under the sun why they would not retaliate right now and in full force.
Well, as the cabinet meets at this moment in Jerusalem, there is some speculation the Israelis may not retaliate right now. They've been promised by the Americans that the U.S. Air Force would take care of those mobile missile sites in Iraq, that they do not want to have Israel come in and perhaps putting pressure on the coalition of forces arrayed against Iraq. If Israel did not attack, did not retaliate now, would you as a Jordanian consider that as a very positive sign?
Well, I think it would be a positive sign, but knowing the Israelis as well as I do, and their history in the area, you know, they have their own scenario, which does not always coincide, nor does it correspond with the American scenario. So they may take the initiative simply to get the Americans in a worse spot than they are. So that possibility should not be discounted.
The Iraqi missiles, about 10 of them fired from Iraqi territory towards Israel, which exploded there. They obviously overflew Jordanian territory. There wasn't a pilot in them, but there was a missile that went flying over your heads sometimes during the night. Do you expect the Jordanian government to issue any kind of a protest to Iraq? And if not, why not?
Well, the two situations are not exactly alike. I mean, when we are talking about Israel, we are talking about a state that is at a state of war with Jordan, which is not the case with Iraq. Iraq is a brother, it's a friend, it's a neighbor, and Iraq is under terrific attack, as you very well know. So we have to take the circumstances into account. This does not mean that our government may not take the occasion to protest to the Iraqi authorities. I'm sure they will do so.
But the fact is that in this confrontation, Israel is not attacking Iraq. It has been keeping that low profile. It has not been a formal member of the coalition. No Israeli weapons landed in Iraq. The Iraqi missiles were fired, went over Jordan airspace or through Jordan airspace, and landed in Israel. And I understand the long-standing conflict over the Palestinian question, but there is a distinct act of attack which took place here. And if you think that a protest would come, what form would it take?
Well, I do not know, but on the surface of things, what you say is true, that Israel looks like it is not involved. But we know better than that here. And this is what Iraqis have been saying all along, that the mother of all problems is the Palestinian question. We know that because we see it and we live it on a daily basis. In America, you may choose to think otherwise. But in fact, we know that the Israelis have been coordinating with the Western Alliance, that they have been abetting and encouraging and having their own scenario and their own plan. What form the protest will take, I do not know. Maybe a telephone call by His Majesty to President Saddam Hussein, maybe a formal president, maybe our foreign ministry will call the ambassador and lodge a protest with him. I honestly do not know at this moment.
If Israel were to retaliate, if it comes to conflict between Israel and Iraq, you are in the middle there in Jordan. What does Jordan do?
I think we will have to be dragged into it. In fact, really, I think Jordan may have its own initiative. I don't know why everybody is thinking that Jordan does not have any initiative of its own. I mean, we do watch on a daily basis what is happening and what is taking place in the occupied territories. And we know that the mother of the problems, and Saddam Hussein is not telling a figment of his imagination, unless and until such time as the Arab-Israeli conflict is addressed and addressed properly, this is going to fester and keep the area in an unstable and hostile and crisis atmosphere.
Well, I recall last August when we were there, Professor, we were talking along the same lines. It is a problem which has been with us for many years, indeed decades. If you just stand by there for a moment, we're going to take a brief break, and we'll be right back to continue our conversation. So stay tuned.
Okay, sir.
The crisis turns to war, and America turns to NBC News. Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
From Channel 4, this is a Gulf War News Extra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Puckett. Iraq's Saddam Hussein has finally struck back, but many military experts say the blow was not a strong one. It happened about 6 p.m. Nashville time last night. Iraq launched missiles against Israel and Saudi Arabia. Several of the Scud missiles did hit in Israel, but they did not do extensive damage. According to Israel, only 7 people were injured. No one was killed. One concern now, whether Israel will strike back at Iraq. If Israel is at war with an Arab country, it'll be difficult for the Arab nations allied with the U.S. to hold together, and the alliance could be threatened. Israel's ambassador spoke in Washington and said his nation was reserving the right to retaliate. So far, it has not. But late last night, Israel hinted it may soon take action against Iraq. The other Iraqi missile was aimed at Saudi Arabia, but a U.S. Patriot missile destroyed it in midair, as it was designed to do. Meantime, the air attack against Iraq continues. Hundreds of additional air sorties were flown yesterday as the U.S. and its allies pounded away at positions in Iraq. Allies have begun to suffer some casualties. One U.S. airplane was blown out of the air, the pilot believed killed. A British plane went down too. The crew is believed to have bailed out somewhere over Iraq. And a Kuwaiti jet was also lost in battle yesterday. So far, the action is still confined to the air, and there's no indication if and when an air assault will begin, or rather grounding.
Feel great, look good, save money during Watson's Health and Fitness Sale. Relax in the bubbling hot water of a Watson's 5-person hot tub for only $19.99. Or a 4-person spa, only $14.99 complete with cover and chemicals. Get that deep dark tan from a Wolf Tanning Better Canopy. 9 models on display starting at $9.99. Rich Nordic Spruce Saunas for only $19.99 complete. 6 months, same as cash. Financing available. That's Watson's, 1182 Antioch Pike, Nashville.
Watch Restoration with James Robinson every week on this channel. Restoration is a program designed to meet your needs, and James Robinson has a message unlike any other in the Christian world. Discover restoration in your life.
These are tense times at Fort Campbell, home to some 19,000 troops who are serving in Saudi Arabia. For family and friends at home, it's not an easy wait. Carlos Bain is standing by live at the fort with his report. Carlos?
Sharon, the Fort Campbell remains on what is called ThreatCom Bravo. That's the second level of security here. That means everybody going in and out of this base will be checked. Their cars will be checked thoroughly to make sure that no threats of terrorism take place here. Tonight, there is an uneasy calm. People are waiting for, in effect, the other shoe to drop. This has been an air war up to now. The 101st are ground troops. They're waiting to see when, in fact, those ground troops will be called up to take part in Operation Desert Storm. There is no word yet, and there is no confirmation yet on where the 101st is. There will be none. That is highly classified information, although there is speculation by Senator Sasser of Tennessee that some of the members may be behind enemy lines, but there's no confirmation here, and there will be none. There will be updates throughout the day, and we'll have those for you. There will be briefings in the morning and in the afternoon. Reporting live from Fort Campbell, I'm Carlos Bain. Back to you.
Thank you, Carlos. With the onslaught of war, family members of Tennessee National Guard soldiers may be in need of special assistance. The Tennessee National Guard is offering a special family assistance program which offers counseling and financial help for families in need. Those needing help can call one of two numbers established by the Tennessee National Guard. Those numbers are 252-3326 or 252-3329. Taking a quick look at Nashville's weather. Currently it's 31 degrees under clear skies, winds from the south at 6. The barometer 30.27 and rising, and humidity 100%. Stay tuned to Channel 4 for continuing coverage of the latest developments of the Gulf War. NBC will bring you 24-hour coverage of the latest happenings in the Middle East, and Channel 4 will bring you local updates every half hour. Our next update at 3:25.
Channel 4 and NBC bringing you full Gulf coverage.
From NBC News, America at War continues. Here are Garrick Utley and Mary Alice Williams.
There are these developments in the Persian Gulf War this morning. The Allied attacks on military targets in Iraq and Iraqi-occupied Kuwait are still going on this morning, unrelenting, nearly a day and a half after they began. This morning, Iraqi radio declared that the war will be a long one. An announcer read a statement saying Iraq's final decision is confrontation. It will be a long-term confrontation. The announcement came just hours after the Iraqis launched a missile attack on Israel. Though damage was extensive, Israeli officials say that 10 people suffered only minor injuries. This morning, the Israeli cabinet is meeting in urgent session. It begins right now to decide whether to retaliate. Israel's anger is being matched in Washington, where President Bush condemned what he called Saddam Hussein's further aggression. The White House announced that a fresh wave of air attacks had been ordered against Iraqi missile sites. Now, earlier attacks have caused massive damage and forced the population into shelters. Returning pilots said they ran into intense anti-aircraft fire. Meantime, Air Force B-52Gs have begun